Recently, the independent film Sound of Freedom released. It's a film based on a true story of a man that fights to free children that are being sexually trafficked. So, as we are all aware of the rampant and horrific existence of child trafficking, why would any rational person or mainstream media outlet come forward publicly to denounce a film that brings much needed attention to this issue? I have an idea about that. So, let's talk about it. Hey, welcome back to Enough with the Crazy. On July 4th, the film Sound of Freedom was released. It is a movie based on the true story of former Homeland Security agent Tim Ballard on a dangerous mission with his team to save children that are being trafficked in Colombia. Now, one would think that any rational person would simply be happy that children being sexually trafficked were rescued and that attention on a national level was being brought to this very important issue through a movie. Especially since, according to UNICEF, every year millions of girls and boys around the world face sexual abuse and exploitation. But unfortunately, not everyone is happy about the film because there are certain liberals who are coming out against it and actively trying to get people to not watch it. These people are claiming that the film isn't worth seeing because, according to them, it has direct ties to QAnon conspiracy theories, specifically in their belief that a core group of Satan worshipping elites run the world and are involved in a global child trafficking ring. And because, according to an article in Forbes.com, the organization Operation Underground Railroad, who was depicted in the film, were the subject of a Vice investigation that claims the organization has exaggerated its role in sex trafficking rescues, with multiple law enforcement agencies saying their work with Operation Underground Railroad has been insubstantial. Now, if that is indeed the case, then of course I want to know because I wouldn't want to maybe support any organization that really isn't doing the work it promotes that it does. However, if you're going to make this claim about them, then tell me which organizations have said this for credibility's sake. Tell me if it's the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security, or even which local law enforcement agency has said this. And even still, why advocate not watching the movie at all? Why not just make a point to say that it's embellished, but the intention it brings to the problem is valuable? After all, if nothing else, this movie has brought more attention to the horrors of child trafficking than anything else I can remember. And isn't that a good thing? With millions of children being trafficked and horrifically abused, isn't this something that we all need to feel the sting of? Shouldn't everyone be painfully aware of what these poor children are suffering day after day at the hands of these perverted men? For the life of me, I can't imagine why this atrocity hasn't been consistently at the top of our government's listing of heinous crimes that need to be stopped, with those involved being severely punished. But sadly, I hear more about what is trending on TikTok than I do about these abandoned, terrorized children. So, what then could the reason be that we don't consistently hear about the trafficking of children? And what reason could there be to interfere with the movie that brings the horrors of this issue to light? Well, as I think about what that reason could be, I think about Jeffrey Epstein and all the rich and powerful men who he provided with children. I think about how he had a list of those who were associated with him in the children he trafficked, and of how he suspiciously died by suicide in prison. In case you're not aware of just how suspicious his suicide was, according to a Los Angeles Times investigation article dated June 27, 2023, quote unquote, numerous and serious instances of misconduct and dereliction of duty contributed to a setting that allowed arguably one of the most notorious inmates in the Federal Bureau of Prisons custody the opportunity to take his own life, DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz said. According to the investigation report, he was on suicide watch, but that was removed the day after his attempt. That's right, the day after his attempt. Now, we all know that anyone who is deemed suicidal is by law required to be under watch for at minimum 72 or more hours. But for some reason, not only was he removed from suicide watch the day after his alleged attempt to kill himself, but his cellmate was also removed, whereby he would be left alone in his cell. The article goes on to state that, quote, only one cell in the unit was searched on August 9th, and it was not Epstein's. The report said that none of the required inmate counts were done after 4 p.m., and staff did not conduct their 30-minute rounds after about 10:40 p.m., unquote. And, quote, Had Epstein's cell been searched as required, the search would have revealed that Epstein had excess prison blankets, linens, and clothing in his cell. Now, isn't it interesting how an inmate that reportedly attempted to commit suicide was given extra linens, which would easily give him the means to hang himself? And also, how coincidental is it that the required cell check wasn't done on the night of his suicide? The article continues on to say that, quote, the staff also falsified count slips and round sheets to show that they had been performed when they were not, leaving Epstein unobserved for hours before his death, unquote. Now, amidst all the speculation that Epstein could have exposed many rich and powerful men in trade for a plea deal, how coincidental is it that all of these quote unquote serious instances of misconduct and dereliction occurred on the night that he was discovered to have killed himself? And what of Ghislaine Maxwell, the woman who was closest to Epstein and who assisted him in trafficking children? The woman who also had the list of all the rich and powerful people that her and Epstein provided children to. Well, upon her conviction, she was sentenced to serve her time in the Federal Correction Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, the prison that inspired the TV series Orange is the New Black. However, in a last-minute shocking change, the original judge who sentenced her to the harder prison in Danbury reassigned her to serve her time in a low-security federal correction institution in sunny Florida, where they have both indoor and outdoor activities. Activities such as yoga, frisbee, Pilates, arts and crafts, and flag football. Not to mention that they offer intramural team sports such as softball, basketball, and volleyball. Now, it's interesting how she refuses to name names, but then gets transferred to what I would call a prison country club. To anyone with any level of common sense, these many quote unquote coincidences are just too much to believe. It seems pretty clear that powerful people didn't want their names revealed and ensured that they wouldn't be, both through the death of Epstein and the reassignment of Ghislaine Maxwell to a cushy prison. And I think that's probably why there are those out there in our mainstream media who are attempting to get people to not watch this film. I would think that with what Americans did to companies like Bud Light and Target after they were made aware of what was being done to children, I have no doubt that these rich and powerful people do not want Americans up in arms about child trafficking because they know that once we are, there would be increased risk for them being exposed. As I recently watched a documentary on YouTube about sex trafficking, a video that I will provide a link to in the description, they made these assertions. Child sex trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise on earth. They also go on to say it is an estimated $38 billion a year business in the United States. Lastly, they claim blackmail involving pedophilia is at the root of much of America's political corruption. Now, that's a frightening thing if indeed that's true. And these are startling claims. And if we as the American people will rally against companies like Bud Light and Target to protect our children from being sexualized in our school system, what more should we not be willing to do to save them when they are actually being abused sexually by these despicable perverts? We have seen that when we band together to protect children, things happen. How much more should we not want to stand together so that those responsible for this atrocity would be brought to light and held accountable? The good news is that despite those who are out there doing their best to silence the message of child trafficking relayed through this movie, the film has just surpassed $54 million in ticket sales and is being placed on more screens. That's actually an amazing thing, as the budget for the film was only $14 million. Now, I really don't know if indeed what I think is correct, but I just cannot reason any other motive anyone could have to come against getting this message out to the public. Any other motive except that certain people are afraid of being exposed if America got serious about this horrific problem and demanded answers. So let me know in the comments if you have a different thought or if you also think the same way I do. And if you like this type of content, please take the time to hit that share button and share it with others, as this will help me to grow my channel. I would also greatly appreciate it if you would hit that like and subscribe button, because that will help me greatly. God bless you all, and as always, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to listen. Until next time.